Awesome. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to both our in-person and our virtual attendees. My name is Nicole Maculin. I am a senior HR business partner with Coyote Logistics, headquartered right here in Chicago. Before we start the session, I do have a few reminders for you. So first things first, if you have not yet, please go ahead and silence your phone. Take a moment to silence that now. Just as a note, when you do open up the chat and the Q&A, it will play out loud. So just in case, that's a reminder for you there. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Questions during the session. So just to note, our speakers will take questions after their presentation, and that will be at the mic right up here. If you are in person, make sure to use that mic for our virtual attendees so that they can hear all right. And our virtual attendees, please make sure you type your questions into the chat. Someone will be monitoring those as well. Session materials, those will be uploaded after this session. You can download them in the app or on presentations.shrm.com. And then also just a reminder for the special survey for feedback for our speakers. After the session concludes, go ahead and complete that in the app or the virtual platform, as we do value your feedback. So thank you so much there. I have the absolute pleasure of introducing both John Ferguson and Dr. Laural Logan-Fain to the stage for the presentation titled From HR to CEO, How to Leverage Your Power Skills to Climb the Corporate Ladder. For more additional information, please check the app. And now, please join me in welcoming John and Laural.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, SHRM 2024. Let's keep the energy up. We are a end of the day session, so you've had lunch. You may have been waiting in line at the Paycom booth. I heard there's someone that's pretty handsome over there, per my team. But welcome. We're excited to be here with you today. Again, my name is John Ferguson, Chief HR Officer at Nascar, Foundation board member, and I'm joined today by...
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Laural Logan-Fain, and I am the Associate Vice President for People Business Partnership with the San Antonio Spurs, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all today. So welcome.
So sports is in the house today. We got two worlds coming together, and you're probably wondering, like, how did this come to be? We have our clipboards because the coaches will be in session today, and we don't have presenter views right here, so we had to have some help with our clipboards. But welcome. So you're probably wondering, how did we get here? Let's get the clicker to work. There we go. We have a little bit of history. Laural and I go back. So that top photo is when I was a student of Laural back in, I think, March of 2019. Spurs Sports and Entertainment University is top-notch. So when I used to work in the NBA, they would send various teams and colleagues across the league to Spurs for their learning and development program. And so I went there and I was a part of an inclusion academy, which Laural led. Our relationship goes back further than that, but that was one key moment where I got to see her in action and be a student of hers.
Yes, and then the tables turned. Last year, I had an opportunity to come to the SHRM Conference in Vegas. Much cooler here this year, which is great. But I had an opportunity to learn from John. John did a presentation last year. And so afterwards, we talked about we should actually get together and co-facilitate a session this year. And so here we are together, and what a difference a year makes.
Yes, indeed. So I want to put a pin there. I want you to track networking and relationship building. No matter where you're trying to go in your career, networking and relationship building is key. We have maintained a relationship probably now over a decade, and then it brought us to this point today. So keep a pin in that. So we're going to talk about what are your career aspirations. That was really the genesis of Laural and I getting together to figure out what we wanted to talk about today. So in that conversation, when we first started brainstorming, I think I was pretty set on like what I wanted. What about you?
You know, when we first started doing research for this topic, it was really interesting because I think we had sort of our minds set on where we wanted to go and what that would look like. And after we did more research in this area, we really had a change. And so it'll be really interesting as we share more with you all. We want you all to be thinking about your career aspirations and what you have in mind, and maybe if any of that changes after today.
Yes, because Johnny alluded to some things in his opening keynote about HR really being able to take the charge. And when I think about the skills that will be needed to lead organizations that are probably now more people-centric than ever before, we are primed for that. So with that, let's do a quick poll. Pull out your cell phones. I don't know about you, but the reception in the building has been a little tricky, so hopefully this works. We would like to know what are your thoughts on your career aspiration just from where you're sitting today? So you can scan the QR code or go to slido.com and then enter the code SHRM24. Let's also hope that my credit card payment went through, okay? So what are your career aspirations? Yes, it went through. What are your career aspirations? Responses are anonymous, so if you're sitting beside your coworker and you don't need them knowing what's next, you can vote here and let us know. We see that we have some CHRO, sounds good. We see CEO, why not, coming in. Yeah. And we say, not sure, can we explore? I think Laural and I, after doing our intensive research, are kind of in the not sure. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. Yes. So let's keep going, because I also get a tally for how many people in the room today. Come on, come on.
Watching it, it's kind of like watching a NASCAR race.
It is.
To see
who's going to be in the lead?
First.
Okay. I think CEO, why not, might cross the finish line first. Ooh, okay, CHROs, y'all coming in heavy.
Neck and neck.
All right, we're up to 172 people. That is impressive. We want to thank you all for coming and being with us today. It means a lot to us because we have prepared what we believe is a very interesting conversation. All right, there's some CEOs in this room, or aspiring CEOs. Yes. I like it. Exciting. There may even be some currently in the room. All right, so let's jump into how we want to approach this conversation. I think it's very important that you sort of level set language when you're going through this process. So we're seeing a noticeable trend in research that states that CHROs are becoming more and more primed to be CEOs. As companies become more global, do mergers and reorganizations, HR leaders are well positioned to add value to these transformations. Why? Why are we well positioned? Because we pay attention on the best ways to communicate to employees during times of uncertainty, and we have experience in developing talent to lead our companies to a more successful future. Johnny said this morning that K-12 education isn't serving the talent that we are going to need, and he put that ownership on HR professionals to make sure that we can prepare the workforce for the skills of tomorrow and in the future. So with that, let's level set some language. What is your career path? Level setting language is always important to me because if you've ever been in those conversations and you're like, oh, I thought you were referring to this. Oops, I had a whole different thought process. So let's talk about a CEO, the Chief Executive Officer. This is the highest ranking executive in a company. The CEO is responsible for the overall success of the organization and for making top-level managerial decisions. Their duties typically consist of providing a vision and direction for the company, setting and implementing the company's strategic goals and objectives, making high-stakes decisions regarding company policy, strategy, and operations, of course, overseeing the executive team and overall operations, and then also acting as a main point of communication between the board of directors and corporate operations and representing to external stakeholders. So they're the person that leads out front. They're making a lot of the big decisions that dictate where the organization will go. So now let's go into our wheelhouse. What does the Chief HR Officer do? Or some call it the Chief People Officer. The Chief HR Officer is a corporate officer who oversees the Human Resources Department and is responsible for all HR-related matters. The CHRO is typically responsible for developing and implementing strategies aligned with the overall business strategy, overseeing recruitment, hiring, and onboarding processes, managing employee relations and workplace policies, and what we always like to talk about, managing culture, designing and implementing total rewards programs, and ensuring the organization complies with labor laws and employment standards. Really quick, is everyone ready for the FLSA threshold? July 1, January 1st, all right, are you aware? If not, go Google right now and scramble to make sure you're in compliance. But with that, we understand that while CEOs lead the organizations and make key decisions, the Chief HR Officer focuses on managing the workforce. It is also important to note the evolution of where the HR function reports into. There were days where it reported into a chief administrative officer or a CFO or somewhere else way down in the organization. We're seeing more and more that chief HR officers in the HR function is reporting directly to the CEO. This allows us to experience and have greater presence in front of the board and various shareholders. We have a seat at the table is what it really boils down to. A shift from paperwork and compliance to culture, change management, and strategy. I don't know about you all, but that's very important. Yes. As we were doing our research, we really noticed that there was a rise of the CHRO in the late 90s, early 2000s. That sounds a little delayed when you think about how long human resources or personnel has been acting and motivating and leading in the workplace. So when we think about the evolution of HR, let's discuss the traditional skills that you see represented for CEOs and HR professionals. So for CEO skills, we see typically they're labeled as the hard skills: financial acumen, operational expertise, strategic vision, and leadership. And then if you look down below, you see some evolving skills for a CEO. Digital literacy. I don't know about you. I was like, well, what is that made of? Digital literacy is making sure that you are tech savvy. It's making sure that you have all the systems and processes in place to make data-driven decisions. And what's that new piece of technology that we're all buzzing about? AI. So are you leaning in? Are you leaning out? How are you embracing that tool and technology to help move your business forward? In addition to that, we're seeing adaptability and agility. That really comes down to change and crisis management. If we didn't know what that was, March 2020, we all got a crash course in it. And guess who came to the front of the table that day? HR. Everyone who could solve every other business decision all of a sudden did not know what to do. Oh no, call the chief HR officer, call the HR team. We've always been there, but it was really a moment for us to step to the front of the line and really show our muscles. Although some of that, y'all, we didn't know quite what we were doing either. So we were feeling our way through that moment. And then finally, soft skills. You don't typically see that aligned with the CEO. It's always been the hard skills, the soft skills, the emotional intelligence. And Laura's going to talk a little bit deeper about why we call them the power skills. And then finally, sustainability and ethical leadership. We have to make sure that we're preparing the world and our workplaces for tomorrow. And how are we doing that in a sustainable way? Now we look at the HR skills. We see administrative, we see compliance, recruitment, staffing, compensation and benefits. That definitely screams personnel. And I'm glad that we have evolved. Even the evolving skills, I think HR teams have done a good job of already adopting that. How many of you all have HR business partners within your organization? All right, that's showing how we have evolved. We're being incorporated into the business. We're being partners. We're helping them educate. We're helping them grow the strategy. Then we also see that there's an opportunity for HR to lean into digital literacy also. So we need to embrace artificial intelligence. I love the SHRM formula of AI plus HI equals ROI. Because it's really important that we never lose sight of the human experience and all of that, and understand the nuance of life. Next, we'll see here that we talk about a global perspective. I believe it's very important for HR professionals to look beyond our individual functions, look beyond our individual industries, and make sure that we're noticing global trends, that we're building our networks laterally to understand what's happening in other industries and how we may be better informed as people within our organization, but also in growing and maturing our skill set. And then finally, we see innovation and adaptability. I really believe that there's an opportunity for HR to continue to evolve and have an entrepreneurial mindset. That means going against the status quo. Our president in Nascar always say, hey, I need you to think about your business differently. And so I want you to think about HR differently because it's gotten us this far. You know, SHRM has celebrated 75 years, but what will the next 10, 15, 20 years look like for you, your skill set, and your organization? So now that we've talked about the CEO needs broad leadership skills and strategic skills, the CHRO requires deep expertise in people management. Both need to evolve in digital literacy, and the CEOs of tomorrow will need growth and development with emotional intelligence. So we've level set the language on the two opportunities that may exist. We've talked about the skills, traditional and evolving. Now let's talk about who is in these roles. So we looked at some macro demographics. So this is coming from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics for the current population. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find a slice of data specifically there for CEOs, but we were able to gather information for chief executives. So we level set that with the C-suite. So when you look at the C-suite, who is represented in that population? 30% women, 85% white, 5% black or African American, 7% Asian, and then 6% Hispanic or Latino. Now let's look at the HR professionals. We have 81% women. I don't know about you, but that's already an early trend on how we could make a big change and impact by aspiring to be CEOs. We could really change the representation. We see 77% white, we see 15% black or African American, 6% Asian, and 16% Hispanic or Latino. Do you see what the data is showing us? We can be the difference makers. We can help our organizations increase their competitive advantage by bringing diverse perspectives to the C-suite, specifically to the CEO position. When we think about this, looking at this data, many people do not place CHROs in succession plans for becoming a CEO. However, we have the evolving skills needed to be successful and effective as CEOs. A few HR professionals have made the transition, and we'll talk about 2 examples later. But as we ponder on CEO succession planning, let's think about this. all business leaders continue to face the challenging task of managing change, operating models, mental health, employee fatigue, and complex business environments. Some would say it's crazy out here. I don't know about you, but I definitely have those days I'm like, I need a good stiff drink. It has been a long day. But guess what? As we continue to dig in, we also know that there's an increasing need for CEOs to have high emotional intelligence. And companies are more global and more diverse than they ever have been. Without a day, I said it earlier, our organizations are more people-centric than ever before. One quick slice of data we did find was that for the Fortune 500 companies, women represent just 7% of the CEOs. That's not where we need to be. If we have 81% women represented as HR professionals, there's a huge opportunity. There's a huge opportunity. Laurel, tell us about the other interesting stat that you came across.
Sure, I will. And before I do that, I was just going to say, and John doesn't know I'm going to share this, but the 81% women in HR professionals, never been more reminded of that than today, the multiple times I have gone to the bathroom. Seriously, for
Very
the women in
true.
the audience, you know, every time we step to go to the restroom, the line is outside the door. My husband's here as well. Anytime John and my husband have gone to the restroom, it's like in and out in 20 seconds. And so you look at the preponderance of women in HR profession, you can see it just in the lines in the restroom. So that said, when we looked at CEO Magazine just released some research regarding women in CEO roles, basically, and this is 2023 was the first year where this statistic was no longer actually valid. So what they shared was, one, we all know that women make up more than 50% of the population in the US, but, and the men named John, CEOs, make up just over 3% of the population, but they make up they make up more than 3% of CEOs. So women, though, make up a smaller percentage of that, and we represent more than 50% of the population. So there are more men, or have been more men named John, who are CEOs, than there have been women who are CEOs until last year. Starting to change a little bit.
I like my name, but I don't know, I'm a little saddened by that. I've had some really important women in my life, so we need to be intentional with how we think about our careers. So we've level set language, we understand the roles and the opportunity. We've looked at the traditional and evolving skills. We've looked at the macro data, and now we want to dive into, you're probably wondering, how do I make that transition, John? What do I need to do to close the gap? The challenge for CHROs, let's see here. Yes, the challenge for CHROs expanding beyond the function is acquiring sufficient technical and financial skills, either in education or career steps along the way. If succession to CEO is the desired outcome. So we've looked at the potential gaps, and we have 4 steps that you can take for must-haves if you want to continue to evolve in your career. I also believe that these 4 must-haves help you in any career aspiration that you have. So especially if you're in the HR function, so take heed. The first one is accountability for P&L. A key component for both consideration and success as a CEO is demonstrable responsibility for profit and loss. CEO candidates, especially in the commercial sector, are expected to know how to run a business from direct experience. They should have a deep understanding of business models, including how businesses generate revenue, achieves profitability, and then sustains that profitability over time. We've all heard about the bottom line. CHROs traditionally do not possess this skill set, but can acquire it by taking on additional responsibilities, such as leading a business unit or serving on the company's executive committee. We're seeing that starting to increase more and more. Developing thorough understanding of the company's business strategy and financials is crucial. Further competencies can be gained through executive training and development programs or getting graduate degrees, such as an MBA. So that's the first must-have. The next must-have is to have a big picture vision. Long-term strategic thinking is essential for CEO success. Effective leaders can envision future of the business and make short-term decisions that will have long-term impacts. This capability stems from both top-tier experience and in-depth understanding of a company's competitive position and potential achievements. For CHROs, it is vital to establish an informed and considered vision for the organization and articulate how you would do that as a CEO. Clear and effective communication of this vision is crucial. Gaining insights from participating in boards and understanding the strategic challenges and opportunities can help inform your decision. Additionally, thorough knowledge of industry trends and emerging technologies along with a data-centric mindset, will be beneficial. We're going back to that digital literacy, being accustomed and adapting to new technology. So now we have accountability for P&L, big picture vision, and then the third must-have is an effectively supercharged network. Navigating complex challenges and driving business growth are hallmarks of a successful CEO. They rely on the support of their senior executive team, peers, broader management structure, and the employee base. In today's focus on company culture, CEOs must foster a positive and collaborative and transparent working environment. Typically, CHROs and folks in HR excel in this area more than CFOs or chief operating officers. As people, we often have well-established networks within the company, including with stakeholders, the board of directors, and other executives and employees. Many times, we're the coach to our peers. We help them navigate complex situations, specifically when it comes to personnel. You know, sometimes leaders can do all sorts of change out in public, but one of their direct reports gives them a challenge. They're like, oh, I don't know what to do. So we're able to help them with that. Strengthening strategic ties internally and externally is also advantageous. I want to give a shout out to my executive network cohort who's here with me today. We have been a band of brothers and sisters and people, but that's an example of a supercharged network that can help you generate ideas, talk through complex solutions, because what we do know is that I believe the two loneliest positions in an organization are the CEO and the CHRO. So with that, we have to figure out where we can establish community. And then finally, the number 4 must-have is a multifaceted executive experience. Many leaders excel in their specific roles, but are often siloed in their skills, expertise, and perspectives. CHROs aspiring to become CEOs need substantial, multifaceted executive experience throughout their careers. This showcases their ability to think beyond traditional departmental boundaries and handle broader organizational challenges. Those with cross-functional experience and international exposure will be more competitive for CEO roles. CHROs have led other function areas such as sales, operations, and finance will also have a distinct advantage. Now, the next chart that I'm going to show was one of our initial sort of research pieces, and it came from Harvard Business Review. And it talks about the trait alignment of the CHRO and the CEO. And it goes across 3 sort of buckets. You see leadership style, thinking styles, and then emotional competencies. The CEO is in red, and we circled it up top, and then the CHRO is the lighter blue. We also see represented the CFO, the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Officer, and then the Chief Marketing Officer. What really stood out to us was how closely aligned the CEO and the CHRO to each other already. So we're showing a lot of opportunity here and a lot of success and skill sets that we already have once we're able to close the gap. I hope this slide inspires you first and foremost. For the HR professionals in this room, know that our skill set is valuable. Know that our skill set is valuable. Please know that our strengths are what will carry our organizations forward today and in the future. I'm going to turn it over to Laural.
Thank you, John. So we want to talk a little bit now about how to define, develop, and demonstrate your power skills. And when we were looking at more research, we have found a study and something I've leveraged through working with our executives at the Spurs and working with other leaders across San Antonio and Texas. So we have a Harvard Business Review article here, and I have a graph up here that we want to share with you all. This is a study that was shared in 2022. And the researchers looked at 5,000 resumes. They partnered with executive research firm, basically looking at C-suite roles, job descriptions from about 5,000 job descriptions. And it wasn't just CEOs. They looked at job descriptions for chief marketing officers, chief information officers, CHROs as well. And you can see the graph here. You have a green line going up and you have a blue line going down. The blue line going down is really looking at the operational skills that John was talking about. Those were the skills related to business acumen, looking at financial, being able to have strong operational skills. Those were still very important skills to have for C-suite, for CEO in particular. But what you'll see, what's been trending, what was most important and most notable in looking at those 5,000 job descriptions is soft skills. That was the number one skill that these recruiters essentially were looking for when they were looking at C-suite. And the soft skills or the social skills are what CHROs, people, what we are, human professionals, HR people, have typically in spades. And so we talk about, oftentimes they're referred to as soft skills. These are things John and I are really referring to, though, as power skills. And so here are a few, if you dive in a little bit more, here are a few that have been highlighted as social skills. So some of them are things like high level of self-awareness, ability to work with different types of people and groups, theory of mind, and this is really the capacity to understand how people are thinking and feeling, excellent communication. And I'm going to also pair that one with the ability to effectively manage and resolve conflict. So we think about communication, we think of verbal communication, we think of written communication. You also think about the ability to manage conflict effectively. So when we talk about these being soft skills, I would dare anybody, you all know employee relations and you know the conversations that we have to have with employees. I think to effectively manage those and to keep employees really motivated, that is not a soft skill. That really is an art. To keep people really motivated after you have to have those courageous conversations with them, that really is a power skill. Do that effectively is really, really impactful. So those were some of the skills. A few other ones that they had identified, things like being an active listener, relationship management, vulnerability, and trust. So these really talk about not really the what you are doing, but it's the how. It really is the behavioral competencies that are really so important and so critical. And so when I think about that, think about also living in Texas, Brene Brown, huge fan of hers. She often, I see some heads nodding, lots of Brene Brown fans, but she'll oftentimes say, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so those power skills, being very clear, being able to articulate all that, really, really critical. So again, these really lean into those effective power skills. And that's where we really believe, and research is telling us, that HR professionals, our CHROs, are really primed to move into those CEO roles if they're able to really embrace some of the opportunities that John shared and close some of those gaps. So those are a few things that we wanted to share with you all based on this research. Two that we want to dig into a little bit more with you all. One is effective storytelling. So we're going to come back to that in a little bit more depth. We're going to give you some examples of some leaders. And then also we're going to do a little effective, hopefully effective, storytelling. But we also want to share a little bit more about this idea of empathy as well. So as we did a little more research, this notion of empathic empathy or empathic accuracy we came across too, and that was really important. So when we think about sort of the old school CEO, gone are sort of those days of that maverick, that command and control. So it was sort of that driving for results at all costs. Many of you who've been in the career world for a long time can remember those folks. Sort of driving at all costs, leaving that wake of destruction behind. Today, it's more that inspirational, aspirational leader. And that's how so many of our CHROs show up. That really is, as we see Gen Z more and more entering the workplace, more collaborative workers, that is what they're wanting in a leader. So that, again, is where this empathic leader is really primed. And so some of the things they're looking for are collaboration, also leaders that really understand not just having empathy, but really understanding what makes people tick. And that's the kind of leader of the future that we're looking for. So I think about big quote person. I think about one of my favorite quotes, and as John and I were doing this, this is one of his favorite quotes too. Again, it's the how. So I'd love to quote Maya Angelou. She'll say, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so that's the kind of leader, that inspirational, aspirational leader that we're looking at for thinking about our CHROs moving into the world of CEOs. So we want to share a little bit of data behind this as well. So this comes from the State of Workplace Empathy Report. There's one that just came out in 2023, and we have some stats for you all. The first one is 80% of employees would be willing to have their company, 80% of employees would be willing to leave their company for a more empathetic employer, and 57% would take a pay cut to do so.
That's shocking.
As long as they feel like they're being paid fairly, they're going to go to a place where they feel cared about, a place where they feel valued. So let's take a look at our next. 83% of Gen Z's employee would choose an employer with a strong culture of empathy over an employer with a slightly higher salary versus 75% of other employers. So we know that Gen Z looks different than our existing employees. So I hate to say sort of normal, but maybe our typical employees. So this is really important to them. And then finally, 80% of employees are confident that they can find an employer who is more empathetic elsewhere. So if we are not showing up this way for our employees, they're going to go somewhere else where they can find that, even if they have to take somewhat less pay to do so.
Is this resonating?
Yeah. And I will say, as you go and you look through the SHRM conferences, the different sessions that we had, empathy is showing up in spades. You see it all across the titles here as our generational differences. Dr. Ferguson, John's lovely wife, did a session right before this, talked about the different generations. She can attest to this as well. She gave us some great information in that session also. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about storytelling now. We're going to, as I mentioned, share a little bit of ours, and we have some examples too, but John's going to set up a framework for us as you're thinking about your career progression. If you want to be that CEO, or you want to be a strategic advisor, HR business partner, or something completely different, which could also be really amazing, we have this framework that we put together for you all to consider. Some questions for you, and John's going to describe a little bit more.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurel. So here we see describe your passion, your purpose, clarify your strengths, your weaknesses, skills you have, skills you need. We listed the 4 must-haves there. And then last, what are your non-negotiables? For us, let's think about work-life balance. Let's think about family, financial freedom, location. But a lot of this framework was something that we sort of evolved through as we were doing our research and really doing self-reflection on ourselves. But it was really informed by Peter Drucker, who is a management professor. Who's in here familiar with Peter Drucker? Yes, he has a lot of good information out there. Some of it might be getting dated now, just a little bit. But he had a great article where he talked about managing oneself. And he emphasizes the importance of self-awareness, self-management, and personal and professional success. So, a few key points. He says, know yourself. Drucker stresses that individuals must understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and their preferred work styles. He also says, focus on your strengths. He almost says, forget about your weaknesses. Only power towards your strengths. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, and Adam Grant doesn't agree with that. Adam Grant is a professor at Wharton and organizational psychologist. Adam Grant says that if you only focus on your strengths, you are adopting a fixed mindset. If you only focus on your strengths, you are adopting a fixed mindset. You're not believing in the power of yet. So with that, I encourage you to have a growth mindset. Yes, keep your strengths in front of you, but know that you can develop a muscle in any other area. And even as CEO, guess what? You don't have to be the expert at all things, but you should know enough to be able to handle business transactions and speak confidently and informed. Of course, you're going to have your C-suite around you to be those specific experts. So keep that growth mindset in front of you. And that's when I talk about Peter Drucker. As we evolve, you want to keep a balance between your strengths and your areas for opportunity. Develop a feedback loop. As we grow higher in our organization, I think feedback may become more, it may become less, it sort of depends. But I think you should always have a thirst for feedback. Drucker emphasizes the importance of seeking feedback to understand how one's actions and behaviors affect others. And I think that's really an underscore of emotional intelligence, that's having that self-awareness piece. And then he talks about managing relationships. That's what we put a pin in when we show the pictures of our friendship over the past 10 years. Manage those relationships because the individuals must understand how to work with others and how to adapt to various environments and styles accordingly. Next, plan for the second half of your life. This really resonated with me. Peter Drucker says you can have a second career. I don't know if I've always looked at life that way. It's kind of like, all right, I'm in HR, I'm going to be in HR forever. But he says you could have a second career in the second half of your life. So that really was an aha moment. And then finally, he says, take responsibility. I tell a lot of employees this. They come and they're like, well, you didn't consider me for that opportunity. Oh, I didn't realize you were interested. There's a number of things. So we have to take control of our professional development. We are in the right seat and know what we want to gain out of any work environment. So rather than relying on external factors or potentially blaming others for setbacks or dreams deferred, we need to take ownership of that. And HR professionals, we don't get asked every day what are our career aspirations. We're typically modeling that and helping others throughout the organization see that. So the purpose of today is to make sure that you are reflecting on your career as you continue to grow. So with that, Laura's going to walk us through some examples of some leaders that have made the transition from HR to CEO.
Yes, thank you, John. And typically, we're the ones who are on the search committee who are helping find the CEO. So we have to figure out a way to make ourselves more vocal if that is the role that we also want to be considered for. So we have a couple of examples. As we were doing research in this area, it was really interesting because we did not find a lot of CHRO to CEOs, people who were career HR professionals. What we did find were more people like this individual here, Lena Nair. She is CEO of Chanel. In addition to being an amazing dresser, she's a phenomenal dresser, she also has an amazing career. She spent about 30 years, Unilever's where she had been, and she did about 6 years stint in HR, becoming the CHRO. And then she moved over to becoming the CEO for Chanel. That was a typical career path we saw if somebody wanted to be a CEO. Basically, they spent about 6 years or some time in HR. So that was basically where we found more of the people living and kind of what their career trajectory was. We did, however, find this individual too. Amit Malik, CEO of Aviva India. He had a pretty non-typical career path, which was really kind of amazing. His was more HR. He was MBA in HR management. He was HR business partner, moved in different trajectories, all in HR. And then wound up being VP of HR, and then head of HR, and then moved into, eventually, CEO role. So he really was that career HR person before moving into a CEO position. But what I love about it is actually the quote that he has here. He says, "It is also important to take risks." He says, "I wish I had the opportunity to move into cross-functional positions earlier in life, take a different role for a year, and come back for a year. And come back to my functional expertise after 1 year. Success is not only vertical, but it can also come in the form of building lateral skills." And so this is what John had mentioned earlier. How do you build that P&L experience? How do you get other experience and then move into that CEO role? So here's some great advice from an individual who really kind of made it through the ranks. But how do you get that other experience so it's not just that, moving up the career ladder, it's where can you get the other experience throughout your career. So again, we wanted to give you all a couple of examples. And then we thought, it'd be really interesting if we kind of share our walking through our own, thinking through career pathing. And so, John, we want you to walk through a little bit, kind of your story. And we know you have a couple of pictures here. And I would love for you not only to share the picture of you and your family, but also with your coworkers here. And be sure you come back to, I know you have something really important on the t-shirt.
Yes.
So be sure if you forget, would love for your coworkers to shout out what is on the t-shirts. I think that's really important.
Yes, thank you, Laurel. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of how we evolved our conversation and where we saw ourselves going. So I'll start with the photos. The top photo is my family. We were at Daytona International Speedway. You see myself, my loving wife, Dr. Ferguson. You also see my two daughters, Maddie and Olivia, who are phenomenal coaches. They really teach me how to lead and operate with people in the workplace. And then you see my mother. She's 72. Johnny said that 75 plus is the fastest growing segment of the population. My mom, in fact, still works. I actually think that's good for her to keep her active. But that's surprising to hear that, in the next couple of years, she may continue to work. But I also recognize that she is getting older. And then on the other side of her, you see my older brother. Despite the gray beard, he is my brother. And then down below, you see my dynamic team. I want to shout out the NASCAR HR team that's here with me today. We have Kelly, Melissa, Alicia, and Nancy. But a few years ago, it was actually SHRM Visionaries Conference in Chicago. Was that 21 or 22? I can't remember, 22. We heard from a young entrepreneur who had a company called, I think it was 21 Pineapples. But they had T-shirts that said, "Be a good human." I immediately left the conference, ordered them for the department, and that was our theme for 23. We wanted to be good humans. And so when I think about my purpose and passion, it's sort of channeling and being in that space of being a good human. I think of so much that we do in HR is helping people during tough times, sad times, good times, and we're there. And that's important because we're helping people get closer to what their purpose, what their mission is in life. And sometimes we help people see beyond their own limitations. So when I think about purpose and passion, that's important. But I also reflect on being a working father, having 2 daughters that I want to make sure that I'm at home for, that I'm present. I want to be a supportive husband, making sure that I can be there for her. Then I also think about work-life balance. And then I talked to this earlier, aging parents. Every time I go home, without a doubt, I see that my mom is slowing down. And I also get really sad. And so I'm coming back to Florida. She's in South Carolina. And there's always this lingering of like, I could have done more. And my mom's like, you come here, you always stay busy. Because I'm like, I need to cut the grass, I need to clean the gutters. I need to do all these things for you while I'm there. But that's me recognizing that she's getting older and that she's slowing down. And so when I think about work-life balance, I need to start trying to figure out how can I incorporate more weekends to go back home and be there for her to make sure she has what she needs. Then you think about growing into a CEO-ship, if that's where you desire, that's a 24-hour demand, y'all. That is 24-hour demand from the seats that I've been able to see. And I think that is something that at this stage of where I am, I'm not sure that would be good in many ways. Then you also think about, you see this as CHRO, but also as a CEO, decision fatigue. You see driving outcomes through others, and so you have to make tough decisions. We're going right, but the company's going left. And we're gonna have to do some change. We're gonna have to have some tough conversations. And so again, it goes back to that second half of life. Then I also reflect on the type of company that would be important. So I wouldn't say recently, but it'll be 3 years for me at NASCAR in September. And it has been a phenomenal ride. But I know coming in, I took some risk. I wasn't sure, I firmly believe that when you interview, people send their representative. And so I sent mine, they sent theirs. And after about 3 months, you started to ease in and you see kind of those natural tendencies. But what I was very happy to see is that for the most part, who I saw was true to who they were and true to who I am. So we showed up pretty authentically. But when I started with the company, I was very intentional in doing a bit of a listening tour, and I did one-on-ones with everyone on my team. And I asked them, and even beyond my immediate HR team, what is your greatest NASCAR memory, moment, like what resonates with you? And there were 2 themes that popped out of that. One of which was their first NASCAR race typically has been like the Daytona 500, which is the Super Bowl of our sport. And quick plug, we're also hosting our 2nd annual Chicago Street Race in Chicago, July 6th and 7th. Clap it up for NASCAR, clap it up. But that is us thinking about our business differently. So shameless plug there, but we'd love to invite all of you there. And if you want a ticket link special for SHRM, see us afterwards, okay? But in that, we talked about the race experience, their first NASCAR race. But second, I wouldn't even say second, equal to was how NASCAR as an organization wrapped their arms around them during a time of need. Whether they were sick, whether their child was sick, their parents were sick, or they had a death. I have seen without a doubt that NASCAR says, go take care of your family. When we talk about a people-first company culture, I believe that we live it. And I try to model that with my team so that, hey, if someone's sick and you need to get out of here, we'll figure this out, go. And so when I think about my career aspirations, it's making sure that I can find an environment where all of those things are true. So no matter where you are in your HR journey, being aware of the HR gaps of becoming a CEO are still valuable to you. So if you want to be an HR business partner, or you maybe want to start your own business one day, those gaps are still the tools we need to continue learning and continue evolving as HR professionals. So I'm not exactly sure what's next. I know that where I am right now, I am excited, I am happy, I feel fulfilled. But I really sit and ponder what Peter Drucker said about the second career. And so that's where my thoughts are going. What would be next? So, Laura, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, John. And I'm sure there's so many people in the audience who can relate to, if not all of it, different parts and pieces of what you shared. So thank you for that.
So now we're going to reverse it.
Yes.
And Laura's going to go into her career aspiration framework.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. So I'll share some of my pictures here. This is my family. Those people, anyone who knows me, and we have some NBA folks in the audience from the Hornets and the Grizzlies, and we have some of our San Antonio SHRM contingency here too, so thank you all for being here. But anybody who knows me knows that my family is my heart, and they are my everything, and I'm sure that's true for so many of you all in the audience as well. I think if COVID taught us nothing, it's taught us that we literally were in the hearts and homes of so many of our staff and so many of our family, and we learned so much more about them. So these pictures are very near and dear to me, and my husband's in the front row here. He's the muscle in the front row here.
Come on, don't be shy. Let's clap it up for him. Let's clap it up for him.
Row, yeah. All right. But this is our son in the top right corner as you all are looking. This is several years ago when he was little. We're all in our Spurs hats. We are, not only do I work for the Spurs, but we're all genuinely fans of the Spurs. This is when he was little, and for those of you, he's now 17, bottom right here. He is now driving, so I no longer have my part-time chauffeur job. Whew, that has given me a lot more time back, so very nice. He's now also probably about 6'1", 6'2", wow, with the hair, maybe about 6'3", 6'4". In his Nike kicks, probably a little bit taller. My husband will never admit this, but he's probably a little taller than my husband now, too. But anyways, he's now grown, 17. Now he's a senior in high school. And then I also have a photo of our people and culture team. They are also very near and dear to me. I've been with the Spurs for over a decade, it's almost 12 years, and some of the folks I've worked with the entire time that I've been there. And they are friends, they are people that I trust, they are people that I rely on. Again, as people and culture folks, you know the trials and tribulations going through COVID together, so much that has bonded us exceptionally. So my journey began in thinking about careers. We've talked about this. 2021, I was promoted. I had been overseeing our organizational development department and our corporate university, did a lot of things there, really built that from the ground up. I was very proud of that work and was asked to oversee a broader scope within our people and culture team as the AVP reporting to our vice president of people and culture. And around the same time, my husband was promoted as well, and he was traveling a lot more with his job. And then our son has always struggled with mental health challenges from birth. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that, either family members or maybe you personally. But it is a challenge, absolutely challenging. And so when he was a freshman in high school around that same time, it was kind of the perfect storm for us in a not positive way. Things sort of happened all at once, and it was a lot. He had a breakdown at school that was probably the most significant one that he had had. He'd been in a couple treatment centers, and I'm always really mindful. I never want to exploit my son. I think of it as a Venn diagram. There's his story, there's my story, and then where the two sort of overlap is where I have some level of comfort sort of sharing. But when that happened, my husband and I were sort of at a loss of what we were going to do because there's so much with our roles that's so demanding. Really challenged to think about what does that look like for our family, and shared this quote with John, my friend Heather, who's here, and some others. The quote is, you can only be as happy as your saddest child. You can only be as happy as your saddest child. And for anybody who's a parent, I think you realize how that hits home. And so I went to my boss, and I knew something's got to give. And I knew it couldn't be my family. So I went to my boss, Tammy, at the time, and said, I can't do this. And she said, what do you need? And so talking with my husband, talking with my boss, decided that intermittent FMLA was going to be the best thing for me and for my family. Worked with her on that, scaled back the scope of my role. And I never left my job, never stopped working. I probably should have. I never did. And I will say a credit to R.C. Buford, who is our CEO, and my boss, Sam Simmons, you can see in that picture there. Now, phenomenal leaders we have. We have an organization that is based on values of integrity, success, and caring. Had great support from our leadership group. But at the time, I remember thinking, oh my God, did I just blow up my career? And I really had to think about that, especially as a woman over 50, thought, what did I just do? So when I think about that, I think of a couple things. One, I think about my son. He is your typical Gen Z. Gen Z is going to represent 30%, upwards of 30% of the workplace by 2025. They are here and they are ready to stay, and they are coming into our workforce in droves. They are showing up very differently. When you think about the way 9/11 has impacted certain generations, you think about the shuttle explosion in my generation for Gen X, when you think about the Great Depression, the Great Recession, you think about things that have impacted generations. COVID has impacted Gen Z in a way that is going to have long-term, lifelong effects. Mental health, they have chronic mental health conditions. Our child is not alone in that. We found out also he struggles with, I wouldn't even say struggles, neurodivergent. So that generation looks very different, and what they need is very different. Again, why CHROs can be so primed to be CEOs, because we understand this about our people. So while this was happening, I had been reading Abby Wambach's book, Wolfpack. Has anybody ever read that? It's a super small book. It's a great, fantastic read, but I want to share with you a little bit about that. So Abby Wambach wrote this book. She was a member of the U.S. Soccer Olympic Gold. She's a gold medalist, and she wrote that book. And I was reading that. She was the co-captain of the women's national team. I think it was around 1995. She was around 35 years old at the time. And all the other women on the team were much younger, much faster. And so her job as the co-captain was to help the coaching staff identify who would be on the starting lineup, which means who would be out there playing soccer on the field. She looked around, she looked at herself, and she looked at her skill set at the time. She recognized she was kind of past her prime. She wasn't the fastest, she wasn't the most skilled. So she went to the coaching staff and said, I don't think I can be on the field anymore. And she benched herself. That hit home. That hit home. I had to bench myself as well. And I remember reading, and I'm going to quote from her book, as I can't paraphrase what she wrote because it was pretty fantastic. She says, "You are allowed to be disappointed when it feels like life's benched you. What you are not allowed to do is miss your opportunity to lead from the bench. If you're not a leader on the bench, don't call yourself a leader on the field. You're either a leader everywhere or a leader nowhere." By the way, she writes, "The fiercest leaders I've ever seen have been parents. Parenting is no bench. It might just be the biggest game. Every woman is a leader of her own life. Do not give up that power. Claim it, value it, use it." And that for me was a real mind shift. Real mindset shift as you talk about. And I realized that the path and the trajectory I had been on was not aligned with me. It was not the path that I was supposed to be on. I work better in the quieter moments. I work better where I have an opportunity to have one-on-one, deeper conversations with people. That bigger, broader scope is not where I do my best work. And what was really amazing is when I stopped going down that path and could humble myself and take a step back and sit on that bench for a while and cheer for the people who were moving down that path, so many new opportunities opened up for me. opportunities like this with John. I see Dr. Staples in the audience here from UTSA. She connected me with folks there, and now I'm doing teaching and training and working with leaders across the state of Texas, opportunities I did not think that I would have. And a whole new world opened up that feels right and feels aligned. So there was nothing in my DNA, no part of me as we went through this process John and I did that wants to be or ever wanted to be a CEO. It was not in my makeup, not in me, not my body, not my mind, not my soul, not my heart, nothing. And we talked about it, and I thought, maybe, unless it's CEO of Me, Inc., maybe I could do that. So as new opportunities come up, that might be a side hustle. Maybe I could do that.
Thank you, Laural.
Thank you.
So I hope our sharing and modeling of going through this framework, but also being transparent, being vulnerable, resonates with you all as you look at your career journeys as you go forward. No matter where you go in your career, if you're working for someone or doing something in leadership, leading change and driving business outcomes is going to be critical. So we got to get back to that bottom line here. But we also want to make sure that you know when, where, and how you want to do that. So we want to talk about some trends that really stood out to us. Mm-hmm. Some of these we've heard over and over because they're just relevant. But the first one is the shifting generational mix in the workforce today. Just to touch on it quickly, baby boomers witnessed the birth of the internet 20 years into their career. Gen Xers received their first personal computers in their early 20s. My brother had that big Macintosh with the green screen and a floppy disk the size of a sheet of paper. I do remember that. And then millennials, that's my cohort, were introduced to smartphones towards the end of high school and early college, but we also saw the birth of social media. Yes, I had a MySpace page. I don't know if it still exists. It probably had some really cool song and a dope background. But I think the first tool that I really leaned into was Facebook. Because right when I was going to college, you had to have the EDU address. I became aware of it like a week before school. So I got on and was like, ooh, look at all these people. But I had to do that from the library because we did not have internet at my home. So even just thinking about that, I was going to the library. Now we have Gen Z. They grow up in an era of constant connectivity, and they don't remember a time without smart devices. And they're also bringing their parents to interviews. Did y'all hear that earlier? 1 in 5 are bringing their parents to interviews. So I'm going to shame on y'all real quick because y'all are the parents showing up. Come on. Help them be self-sufficient. And then there's this evolving skill of digital literacy that we all need. But in that, in leading change and driving business outcomes, we have to figure out how do we meet each of those distinct cohorts where they are to move our business forward. Laural, excuse me.
So we found this great quote. It's by Forbes, and it says, change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again. That's from 2019. That was before COVID, before Zoom, before Teams, before all the change, and before AI was as big as we're talking about it now. So we know things are changing. We have to be more resilient, more adaptable, all of that, all those keywords, AI, everything. We also wanted to share with you, because we thought this was really, really important. We do employee engagement surveys with the MBA. We do them multiple times throughout the year. But this was the most recent data from the Gallup poll on employee engagement, or a Gallup survey on employee engagement. This is first quarter 2024. And what you'll see here is the green line represents employee engagement. The blue line represents actively disengaged employees. What I want you to pay attention to here is the blue line is not just disengaged employees, it's actively disengaged employees. So these are not just the people who are unhappy and dissatisfied. These are the ones that are pulling down the other employees with it. They're so dissatisfied at work. And what you're seeing here is that almost 5 million fewer employees who are engaged right now, this first quarter. Actively disengaged employees are at 17%. We have Gen Z. They're feeling less connected to organizational culture for a variety of reasons. Maybe hybrid is one reason, various other reasons as well. And then finally, employee engagement trends are linked to performance outcomes. So things like retention, customer service and satisfaction, quality of work. Bottom line, it all impacts profitability. So we want those engagement scores. We want our staff to be highly engaged because bottom line, it increases revenue and it increases our profitability, impacts our profitability. And so this is, again, where we think our inspirational, aspirational leaders, you all, are primed for potentially, if you're interested, that CEO role.
So to kind of recap some of the things that we talked about, there is the sweet spot for CHROs to be CEOs. We see our power skills, which we think we have some good experience with. Yes. And then you see those evolving skills that are reflective in the CEOship and for HR professionals. And then we see that operational expertise, which is the gap, the opportunity that we need to build some muscle memory for HR professionals. In the middle there, again, is that sweet spot. So as market dynamics shift and new technologies emerge, HR professionals must continue to adapt. Johnny said it earlier, we got to head into the storm. We have to head into the storm, and I can't think of a better group than the folks in front of me today. Those with business acumen, strategic planning, leadership, and people skills can reach the top. Many organizations limit HR careers, and some HR professionals struggle with establishing credibility. Own your ambition. Own your ambition. Push beyond your comfort zone. Find mentors, show interest, and volunteer in leadership roles. Use transferable skills and seek assignments that accelerate your career. It seems impossible until someone becomes unstoppable. Be that someone. So, from HR to CEO, how to leverage your power skills to climb the corporate ladder. First, you want to identify your goals, talk about your power skills, connect with others through the art of storytelling, and then finally, lead change and drive business outcomes. And then, Laural.
Yes. So I find inspiration everywhere, but I wanted to share this final quote with you all as you consider what your career aspirations are. And this is a quote from actor, comedian, filmmaker Jordan Peele, and he says, "When I'm writing a first draft, I'm constantly reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand in a box so later I can build castles." And so when you're considering your own career and your own path, you're thinking about acquiring those new skills, thinking about how you can shovel those professional skills into your own professional sandbox as you begin to erect your career castle. So with that, we thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. If you have any questions, we're happy to take them. The podium is here, or the microphone is here, and we're also happy if you want to walk up and just have informal conversation. Sure. Thank you all for joining us today.